The Mayfair Estates subdivision was supposed to be paradise. Tree-lined streets, perfectly manicured lawns, and that small town feel just 20 minutes from downtown. When my wife and I bought our dream home there 3 years ago, we thought we'd found the perfect place to raise our family. The neighbors seemed friendly, the amenities were top-notch, and the community events brought everyone together. That all changed when Karen Henderson became HOA president. Karen was one of those people who treated her election to the Homeowners Association board like she'd been crowned Queen of England. Within weeks of taking office, she'd implemented 17 new bylaws, started measuring grass height with an actual ruler, and began issuing fines for violations that nobody knew existed. Her power trips were legendary. She once fined the Johnsons $200 because their garden gnome was, quote, insufficiently whimsical, unquote. Before we continue with this absolutely insane story, if you're enjoying this tale of HOA madness, please hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more stories about entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Trust me, this one gets wild. The annual Mayfair Estates block party was supposed to be the highlight of our summer. Every family contributed something to the potluck, kids ran through sprinklers, and for one magical Saturday, even the strict HOA rules seemed to relax. This year, Karen announced she would personally coordinate the entire event, assigning specific dishes to each household through a color-coded spreadsheet she emailed out 3 times with increasingly threatening subject lines. My assignment was beverages, which suited me fine. I owned a small chain of upscale restaurants in the city, though I kept that quiet in the neighborhood. Most people just knew me as the guy who worked in, quote, hospitality, unquote, and left it at that. I'd learned early on that mentioning my business ventures only led to people asking for free meals or investment opportunities at every barbecue. Karen, of course, assigned herself the prestigious role of bringing the main side dish. She talked about her famous potato salad for weeks leading up to the event. According to her, it was a family recipe passed down through 4 generations, though her sister Linda once told me at a grocery store that Karen got it from a 1970s Betty Crocker cookbook with some mayo substitutions. The morning of the block party, I was loading cases of premium sodas and artisanal lemonades into coolers when Karen marched over. She was wearing her official HOA president badge, which she'd had custom-made at a trophy shop. "Those beverages better be name brand," she said, peering into my coolers with obvious suspicion. "The bylaws specifically state that all potluck contributions must meet community standards." I assured her everything was fine, though I wanted to ask what bylaw number covered potato salad. She huffed and walked away, presumably to harass the Chins about their fruit platter arrangement. The party started at noon, and by 12:30, the community park was packed. Kids were everywhere, elderly neighbors sat under shade tents, and the picnic tables groaned under the weight of casseroles, salads, and desserts. Karen's potato salad sat in place of honor at the center of the main table, in a crystal serving bowl she'd probably bought specifically for this occasion. She stood guard next to it like a museum security guard protecting the Mona Lisa, personally serving each scoop and explaining the, quote, secret ingredients, unquote, to anyone who would listen. The secret, as far as I could tell from eating it, was an alarming amount of raw onions and what might have been expired paprika. Within an hour, something was clearly wrong. The Petersons excused themselves first. Mrs. Peterson's face had turned an alarming shade of green. Then the Washingtons hurried off, Mr. Washington clutching his stomach. By 2 o'clock, the exodus had become obvious. Families were packing up, making polite excuses about forgotten appointments or sudden headaches. The community park that had been bustling was becoming a ghost town. My wife grabbed my arm as we watched another family rush toward the parking lot. "Did you eat the potato salad?" she whispered urgently. I shook my head. Years in the restaurant business had taught me to be extremely selective about consuming mayo-based dishes that had been sitting in the summer sun. Plus, I'd seen Karen transport the bowl in her car that morning without any ice or cooling elements, a food safety violation that would have shut down any professional kitchen. By evening, the neighborhood Facebook group was exploding. Post after post about severe food poisoning, emergency room visits, and entire families down with what Dr. Morrison, who lived on Oak Street, diplomatically called acute gastroenteritis. The common denominator was obvious to everyone. Every single person who'd gotten sick had eaten Karen's potato salad. Those who'd skipped it were fine. But here's where Karen made her fatal error. Instead of apologizing or showing any concern for her violently ill neighbors, she went on the offensive. She posted a lengthy screed on the Facebook group claiming that people were faking illness to avoid their HOA dues, that the real cause was probably the Henderson's fruit platter because she'd seen a, quote, suspicious brown spot, unquote, on one apple, and that anyone spreading, quote, malicious rumors, unquote, about her potato salad would be fined for violating the Community Harmony Clause in Section 12.4 of the HOA bylaws. Then she went nuclear. She started issuing fines to every family that had left the party early for, quote, failure to participate in mandatory community events, unquote. The Washingtons got $300. The Petersons got $300. Even old Mr. Petrov, who'd been hospitalized with dehydration, received a fine delivered to his hospital room by certified mail. I watched all this unfold from my home office, growing increasingly angry. These were good people, our neighbors, and some were seriously ill. The Chin's 5-year-old had been hospitalized for 2 days. Mrs. Washington, who was 78, was still too weak to leave her house. And Karen was trying to profit from poisoning them. That's when I decided to use resources I'd been keeping in reserve. See, my restaurant chain wasn't just successful, it was part of a larger hospitality group I'd built over 15 years. A group that included food safety consulting services, corporate catering, and most importantly, a team of lawyers who specialized in foodborne illness litigation. I also had something else that Karen didn't know about. My brother-in-law was the state's deputy health inspector. I made some calls that evening. First to my lawyer, then to my brother-in-law, then to my insurance broker, who happened to golf with the president of the company that held the HOA's liability policy. By Monday morning, I had a plan that would use Karen's own weapons against her in a way she'd never see coming. Step 1 was the health department investigation. My brother-in-law couldn't officially intervene, but he could make sure the complaint filed by, quote, concerned citizens, unquote, got fast-tracked to the right desk. When 17 people from the same neighborhood event show up at various emergency rooms with food poisoning, that's not just a community issue, it's a public health concern. The health inspector showed up at Karen's door on Tuesday morning. I know because she immediately posted about it on Facebook, claiming harassment and demanding to know who had, quote, betrayed the community, unquote. The inspector wanted to see her kitchen, her food handling practices, and most importantly, any remaining potato salad. Karen made another crucial mistake. She lied and said it had all been consumed, but Mrs. Chen had taken a photo of Karen scraping leftovers back into a Tupperware container after the party. Step 2 involved the HOA bylaws themselves. I'd spent Monday night reading all 237 pages. There, buried in Section 48, was a beautiful clause that Karen herself had added 6 months earlier. Any board member who, quote, through negligence or misconduct causes financial liability to the association exceeding $5,000, unquote, would be automatically removed from their position and banned from holding any HOA office for life. Here's where my insurance broker friend came in handy. He let slip to me, completely legally of course, since the information would soon be public, that 17 insurance claims had been filed against the HOA's liability policy for medical expenses related to the block party. The total was already over $70,000 and climbing. The insurance company was considering dropping the HOA's coverage entirely, which would leave every homeowner personally liable. Step 3 was the masterpiece. Remember those fines Karen had issued to sick families for leaving the party early? That created a paper trail showing that the HOA, under Karen's leadership, had attempted to financially benefit from the mass food poisoning incident. My lawyer called it, quote, unconscionable conduct, unquote, and suggested it could pierce the HOA's limited liability protection, making Karen personally liable for damages. But I wasn't done. See, Karen owned 2 properties in Mayfair Estates, her home and a rental property on the adjacent street that she'd inherited from her mother. That rental property was key to my final move. Through a shell company I used for real estate investments, I made an offer on the house next to her rental, the one she'd been trying to buy for 3 years to combine the lots. The elderly owner had been considering Karen's lowball offers out of desperation, but my offer was $50,000 over asking, cash, with a 7-day close. I also offered to let him live there rent-free for 2 years if he wanted. He practically cried when he accepted. But that wasn't the revenge, that was just the setup. Once I'd owned that property, I had certain rights. You see, there was a utility easement that ran between the 2 houses, one that Karen had been illegally using as a driveway to her rental property for years. The previous owner hadn't cared, but I did. I also discovered that her rental property's sewer line actually ran under my new property, installed without proper permits back in 1992. Wednesday morning, I had a surveyor out there marking exact property lines. By noon, I'd installed a beautiful wrought iron fence directly on the property line, completely blocking her illegal driveway access. Her tenants would now have to park on the street and walk around the block to reach the rental house. But that still wasn't the revenge. The revenge came Thursday afternoon at the emergency HOA board meeting. The health department's preliminary report had come in. Karen's potato salad tested positive for salmonella, likely from eggs that had been left unrefrigerated and then mixed with mayo that had been sitting in her hot car. 17 confirmed cases of food poisoning, 2 hospitalizations, and thousands in medical bills, all traced back to her, quote, famous family recipe, unquote. The insurance company representative was there too. He announced that due to the negligent nature of the incident and the HOA board's subsequent attempt to find the victims, they were not only dropping coverage, but also considering pursuing criminal charges for insurance fraud. The potential liability to the HOA and every homeowner in Mayfair Estates was approaching $500,000. But here was the killing blow. I stood up during public comment and announced that I would personally cover all medical expenses for every affected family, over $100,000, but only on one condition. The HOA had to invoke Section 48 and permanently remove Karen from the board. Furthermore, she had to agree in writing to never hold any position of authority in the neighborhood again, not even volunteer crossing guard. The room went silent. Karen's face went from red to purple to a shade of white I'd never seen on a living person. She started to speak, but my lawyer, who'd accompanied me, handed her another document. It was a notice of intent to sue for the illegal use of my property's easement and the unpermitted sewer line. If she wanted to keep her rental property functional, she'd need to install a new sewer connection, which would cost roughly $75,000 due to the way the lots were configured. Or she could sell the rental property to me at market value minus the cost of repairs. But the final twist was yet to come. I'd done some research on that famous family potato salad recipe. Turns out, Karen's great-grandmother had actually published it in a 1954 community cookbook, which meant it was technically in the public domain. I'd had my restaurant's executive chef refine and improve it, and we'd be featuring, quote, Mayfair Estates' famous potato salad, done right, unquote, as a special at all 7 locations, with proceeds going to a food safety education fund. The board voted unanimously to remove Karen and accept my offer. As the gavel came down, I watched the exact moment she understood what had happened. Her HOA presidency gone. Her ability to ever terrorize the neighborhood again eliminated. Her rental property, now either a massive financial loss or soon to be mine. Her reputation destroyed. Her own potato salad recipe turned into a charity campaign highlighting food safety. She stood up slowly, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, her eyes darting between me, the board, and the stack of legal papers in front of her. The Queen of Mayfair Estates had just been dethroned by her own potato salad, and the revolution had been entirely legal, completely by the book, and served ice cold, unlike her salmonella-infected potatoes. Her hand trembled as she reached for the papers, and I saw the exact second the full scope of her downfall hit her, her eyes widening in pure shock as she realized she'd been completely and utterly destroyed. If you enjoyed this story of Karen's potato salad catastrophe and her epic downfall, please hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more tales of entitled people meeting their match. Remember, revenge is a dish best served at the proper temperature with appropriate food safety protocols.